My grandma, Lorraine, wasn't loud or flashy. She was the kind of woman who spoke with her eyes and answered your questions with a fresh-baked cookie. She raised me more than my own parents did. I was 10 when I started staying with her every weekend, 13 when I asked if I could just live there, 17 when I moved in full-time after Mom took off and Dad stopped noticing. I wasn't just her granddaughter, I was her shadow, her breakfast companion, her pharmacy errand partner, her person, and she was mine. Grandma had a small house on the edge of town, yellow siding, a creaky porch swing, and the smell of lavender oil always drifting from the windows. She called it the little house that held big hearts. One morning, about 6 months before she passed, we sat at the kitchen table with 2 chipped mugs and a lemon tart between us. She reached across the table and gently patted my hand. "Sweetheart," she said, "I want you to have the house when I'm gone." I blinked. "Grandma, don't talk like that." "I'm serious, Kaylee. Your dad, he doesn't love this house, he just sees money in it. You see memories, and I want someone who remembers to take care of it." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and held her hand. Then she stood up, walked to the drawer under the old bread box, and pulled out a thin manila envelope. Inside, a typed-up will, signed, notarized, dated. My name was on it. The house was listed under a full bequeathal to me. "I made this 2 years ago," she whispered. "It's the real one. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I tucked it away in the back of my closet when I got home, behind old shoeboxes, wrapped in plastic, safe. At the time, I didn't realize how important it would become. When Grandma passed, it didn't feel real, even though she'd been sick, quietly, with tired hands and short walks. I thought we had more time. I walked into her bedroom that morning, after she hadn't come out by 9, still and peaceful. And everything after that happened like a blur. The funeral, the casseroles, the fake sympathy from family members who hadn't called her in years. And then, the will reading. My dad showed up in a suit that still had the price tag string hanging from the sleeve. He hadn't visited Grandma in months, not once during her chemo, not for her birthday. He barely looked at me. He sat at the long table in the lawyer's office, like he'd been invited to a game show. When the estate attorney opened the folder, my stomach dropped. It wasn't the envelope Grandma gave me. It was a different document, newer, sloppier. And this one left the house to him. My voice cracked. "No, that's not what she wanted," she told me. "I have her real will." Dad smirked without looking at me. "Kaylee, she changed her mind. Maybe because you pressured her. Maybe because she realized she needed someone responsible." Responsible? Me, the one who took her to appointments, changed her sheets, fed her soup when she couldn't chew? Him, the man who called her a burden and an old bat when he thought I wasn't listening? The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "If there's a contested document, it will have to be validated." I sat in that cold chair, with my hands shaking. Because suddenly, I wasn't just grieving, I was about to fight. I went home that night, locked my bedroom door, and pulled out the box under my bed. There it was, the original will. Clear dates, her signature, a notarized stamp from a year before the one Dad presented. It felt like holding a piece of her heartbeat, and I knew right then, this wasn't just paper. This was a promise. Dad thought I'd roll over. He thought I'd cry and back down. But what he forgot was that Grandma raised me, and Grandma didn't raise quitters. The next day, I skipped class. I sat at the kitchen table with Grandma's original will in front of me, my laptop open, and my hands curled tight around a pen I hadn't even used. I'd never called a lawyer before, didn't know what I was doing. But I knew one thing. What my dad did wasn't right. I started by Googling how to contest a forged will. Within minutes, I was deep in a sea of probate terms I didn't understand. Intestate, revocation, undue influence. But I kept reading. I wasn't just looking for legal advice. I was looking for proof that I wasn't crazy. That what I knew in my gut, that Grandma never changed her mind, mattered. I finally found a local probate lawyer with decent reviews. Someone named Monica Wu. She had a line on her website that made me stop. Protecting what your loved ones meant to leave you. I called. My voice cracked when the receptionist answered. She said Monica could see me the following afternoon. I tucked the will into a plastic sleeve, slipped it into a folder, and packed it in my tote bag like it was something sacred. Because it was. When I walked into Monica's office, I felt small, like the girl Dad always told to stay out of grown folk business. But Monica didn't treat me that way. She shook my hand, offered me tea, sat across from me like I was someone who mattered. I handed her the will, told her the story, every detail. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she took a slow breath and said, "You've got something very strong here, Kaylee." My eyes filled up. "So, I'm not overreacting?" She shook her head. "No, what your father did. If that second will was forged or created under duress, that's illegal. We have a case." That night I stayed up reading everything Monica sent me. Probate law, contest timelines, how to file a formal objection. I didn't eat dinner, didn't watch TV, just highlighted words and took notes like it was finals week. Because this was my final, and it wasn't just about a house. It was about everything they told me I didn't deserve. When the court papers were served to my dad, I wasn't there, but my cousin Danny was. She texted me. "He turned purple. He thought you were bluffing." I wasn't. I'd been bluffing my whole life, pretending their version of events was the truth. Not anymore. That weekend, Dad called. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. "Kaylee," he said. "Not hi, not how are you?" "Yeah? You really filed a court petition?" "Yes." He exhaled hard, like I'd just ruined his day. "I'm your father. You're also the man who lied about Grandma's wishes." She was confused at the end. "No, she wasn't," I snapped. "She was sick, not stupid. And I have her original will." There was silence. "Then, you're making a fool of this family." "No," I said. "You did that the moment you tried to erase her." And I hung up. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Monica filed a formal contest of probate. Dad had to provide evidence for the new will. But guess what? The witnesses on his version? A guy from his poker group and a woman he once dated. Both suddenly had shaky memories. Both admitted they weren't sure what the document said when they signed it. It was unraveling. Just like him. He tried calling again. He even sent Aunt Tricia to talk to me. The same aunt who once told me I was lucky to live with Grandma because she needed a maid anyway. Tricia showed up at my work. I was stocking books at the front of the store when I heard her say, "You need to stop this." I looked up. Calm. Cold. "And what exactly is this?" "Your father's reputation. The embarrassment. You think Grandma would want this?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "Grandma didn't want to be erased. And I'm making sure she's not." She didn't say another word. Just turned and walked out. I went back to organizing bestsellers. When the court date came, I wore one of Grandma's old brooches. A simple gold rose pin she used to wear every Sunday. I felt like she was with me. Dad walked in with slicked back hair and a cheap smile lawyer. He didn't look at me. But I looked at him, not to intimidate, but to remind him I wasn't a child anymore. The judge listened carefully as Monica presented everything. The timeline, the original will, the notarization, the fact that I had lived with Grandma and cared for her in her final years. Then it was Dad's turn. His lawyer fumbled through statements, tried to paint me as an emotionally unstable young adult who misunderstood the situation. I didn't flinch, because truth doesn't need to shout. The judge asked one question that sealed it. Did the decedent ever revoke the will Kaylee James presented to this court? Dad's lawyer said, There was no official revocation on file. The judge nodded. Then he said the words I'll never forget. This court recognizes the original will, dated April 12, 20XX, as valid. Full transfer of property to Kaylee James, effective immediately. I didn't cry. Not until I stepped outside. Then I did. Not because I won, but because justice, real justice, finally spoke louder than family lies. Back at the house that night, I sat alone in the living room. My name was on the deed now. Legally. Permanently. I lit one of Grandma's old lavender candles, and for the first time since she passed, I felt her peace, because the house she built with love was finally where it belonged. After the court ruling, people talked. Not strangers. Not the internet. Family. The cousins who hadn't seen Grandma in years suddenly remembered Sunday dinner. The aunts who never visited while she was sick now called me a selfish brat. I'd hear whispers at the grocery store, or get side-eyed at the gas station. Did you really take the house from your own father? No one cared that my father tried to take it from me first. No one asked how many nights I stayed up feeding Grandma soup, or rubbing her back through the chemo tremors. They didn't want truth. They wanted the version where I was the villain. Dad didn't show his face again. Not in court. Not at my door. But he made sure I heard him through others. Aunt Tricia posted a Facebook status that read, "Some people forget who raised them, but karma remembers." Another relative commented, "All for a little house. Sunlaw." I didn't respond. Not publicly, but I screenshotted every post, saved every message, because I had learned something powerful. Silence wasn't surrender. Sometimes, silence was strategy. I kept the house quiet those first few weeks. No celebrations. No parties. No I told you so. Just the familiar sound of old floorboards and wind pushing against the screen door. I slept in Grandma's room for a while. It still smelled like Vicks and rosewater. Her slippers were tucked under the bed like she might come back for them. At night, I'd lie there and think about the day she handed me that manila envelope. She had known this might happen. She had prepared me. That thought hurt and healed all at once. One morning, I walked outside to check the mail and saw a man on the sidewalk staring up at the house. Middle-aged, tan coat, clipboard in hand. He looked familiar. I stepped forward. "Can I help you?" He blinked. "Oh, sorry. I used to mow the lawn here for Ms. Lorraine." He looked around, then smiled. "She always paid me in cash and lemonade." I smiled back. "She always kept extra lemons just for that." He looked down at his clipboard. "Did you buy the house?" I hesitated. "No. She left it to me." His face softened. Well, she had good judgment. That moment meant more than any headline or Facebook fight. Because he knew her, he remembered. And he believed me. But the peace didn't last long. About 2 months after the court ruling, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I knew all too well, Dad's. Inside was one folded page. "You've made your choice. I hope it keeps you warm at night. When the world forgets you, and you realize no one ever loved you like I did, don't come knocking. You're not welcome." I read it twice, then once more. And then I laughed, not out of cruelty, but because it was so predictable, so perfectly manipulative. That wasn't love. That was control dressed up as concern. I put the letter in a box and labeled it proof, because one day I knew I might need it, not for court, but for myself, to remember why I walked away. Around that same time, I got a voicemail from Danny. She sounded nervous. "Hey Kaylee, just wanted to say, I know what they're saying, but I know what you did was right. Grandma loved you. Everyone else? They just see a house. You saw her." I saved the message. Played it twice before bed that night. Because truth from even one person, it steadied my spine. Fall came. The air changed. So did I. I repainted the living room, kept the old photos on the wall, updated the kitchen, but left the stove untouched. Grandma always said, "That oven's seen more healing than any hospital." She was right. I started writing again, not just in my journal, real writing. I pitched a personal essay to a popular blog, The House My Father Tried to Steal. They published it. It blew up. People emailed me, messaged me, said thank you for saying what I've been too scared to say. One woman wrote, my mom changed my grandma's will too. I never had proof. But your story? It gave me peace. Another said, this made me feel seen, heard, real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not because I won a court case, but because I stood in my truth. Loud, clear, unshaken. That December, I decorated the porch just like Grandma used to. Twinkly lights, garland, a wooden reindeer she'd had since the 80s. Neighbors walked by and waved. Some smiled like they understood. Some didn't. That was fine, because I wasn't decorating for them. I was decorating for her and for me, for the version of myself that no longer needed anyone's permission to stay. By January, the anger in the air had turned cold. Most people stopped pretending to be subtle. At family gatherings, the ones I no longer attended, they called me the girl who stole the house, as if it had ever belonged to anyone but Grandma. Aunt Tricia, in her glittering superiority, even wrote me a message. If you had any decency, you'd sell the house and split the money. Family is more important than bricks. I didn't reply, because that message said more about her than it did about me. But they didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me sorry, ashamed, grateful I wasn't thrown out like a piece of furniture the moment Grandma passed. They couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that I was worthy of being loved, worthy of being remembered, worthy of being chosen, not last, but first. They were used to me shrinking, so when I stood tall, they called it pride. But it wasn't pride. It was healing. One Sunday, I got a knock on the door. It was Danny. She looked uncomfortable, like her shoes didn't quite fit. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Grandma and I used to share lemon tarts and gossip about the neighbors. She finally spoke. They're planning something, she said. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? My mom. Your dad. Uncle Roy. They're talking about trying to appeal the court decision. My chest tightened. On what grounds? They're saying Grandma wasn't of sound mind, that you manipulated her. I blinked. Manipulated her? I changed her bedpans, not her opinions. I know, Danny whispered. I told them they'd lose again, but they don't care. I spent the next 3 nights sleeping with one eye open. I pulled out every piece of evidence Monica and I had already used. I started compiling new notes, just in case. I even considered installing a security camera, not because I was afraid of violence, but because gaslighting is its own form of break-in. They wanted to break into my story, rewrite it, ransack it. I wasn't going to let them. The appeal paperwork arrived 2 weeks later. Thin envelope, no return address. Same lawyer. New claims. This time they attached copies of medical files, selectively chosen to make Grandma look senile. I read them through clenched teeth. One note read, patient showed signs of forgetfulness, difficulty recalling medication schedule, forgetfulness, as if forgetting Tylenol made her forget her granddaughter, as if growing older meant growing incapable, as if love wasn't something she repeated every day with her actions. I called Monica. She was already on it. They're fishing, she said. Desperate people do desperate things. We'll respond. But how do you prove someone was clear-headed in their last year? I asked. Besides a signature, there was a pause. Then Monica asked, did she ever write you anything else? A letter, maybe. I hesitated, then remembered the drawer. It was in Grandma's old nightstand. Back behind the sewing scissors and lavender sachets, an envelope labeled, to Kaylee, if they ever try anything. My breath caught. I sat down on the edge of her bed and opened it. Inside was a 2-page letter, handwritten, firm, slanted script. Sweetheart, if you're reading this, it means someone didn't listen. I told you they'd come sniffing around for this house like raccoons. But you were always the only one who saw it for what it really is. Home. My hands shook. You gave me care. You gave me time. You gave me your whole young heart. This house is yours. Let them fight over ashes. You, my love, were the fire. I exhaled. Shaky, soft, full. There it was. The proof no court could deny, even if they couldn't admit it aloud. Grandma knew. And she wasn't confused. We submitted the letter as part of our response. The appeal was denied within a month. No hearing. No trial. Just one sentence. From the judge. No credible grounds to contest the original probate ruling. After that, they stopped trying. But they didn't stop blaming. I became the ghost of every gathering. The name no one said, but everyone felt. Danny said at Thanksgiving, someone made a joke. At least we didn't end up on her bad side, or she'd take our living room too. I wanted to feel hurt. Instead, I felt free. Let them joke. Let them boil in a pot they set on the stove themselves. I had peace. I started volunteering at the library. Grandma used to love, helped kids with reading, organized old archives. Sometimes just shelved books in silence. There, no one asked about deeds or wills or lawyers. Just, can you help me find a story? And I'd smile and say, yes, but only the good ones. That spring, I planted violets by the front steps, Grandma's favorite. I sat on the porch with lemonade and watched them sway in the breeze. And for once, I didn't feel like I was holding on to what was left of her. I felt like she was still here, in the house she built, in the girl she trusted, in the peace we both fought for and won. The day I finally changed the name on the mailbox, I cried. Not loud sobs, just tears that rolled down my cheeks without asking, because for the first time in months, something was finally mine, fully mine, not in secret, not in silence, not in doubt. Kaylee James. To 133 Maple Ridge Drive. No more Lorraine's house. No more temporary situation. It was home, and it had my name on it now. The mail started coming, addressed to me, property tax letters, city notices, even a welcome package from the local homeowners association. That part made me laugh. I imagined Grandma rolling her eyes from heaven, muttering, "Now don't let them boss you around just 'cause they have name tags." I framed the first utility bill and stuck it on the fridge. Not because I liked paying bills, but because it was proof that I did it, that I survived what they tried to bury me under. I took on a second job at a local bookstore just to keep things afloat. It wasn't glamorous shelving, cleaning, organizing dusty back rooms, but every paycheck made the house more real. Each dollar earned honestly, no stolen inheritance, no manipulation, just me, building a life from the roots Grandma left behind. One afternoon, I was sweeping the porch when I noticed a car slow down in front of the house. It was Dad. First time I'd seen him since court. He didn't park, didn't wave, just sat there, windows up, looking at the porch, at me, at everything he thought he'd claimed. And then, slowly, he drove away. No fight, no words, no closure, just a long stare. I didn't flinch. Later that night, Danny called. Did he come to the house? Just the street, I said. Didn't say anything. Good, she replied. He's still bitter, but not bold enough to admit it. Let him be bitter, I said. I'm building peace. The house became my world. I learned to fix leaky faucets, painted the kitchen cabinets sea green, hung fairy lights along the porch. I left Grandma's wind chime where it always was, near the front door. Every time it jingled in the wind, it felt like her voice saying, "You're okay, baby. You're doing just fine." And for the first time, I believed it. Spring turned to summer. I hosted a little brunch for my close friends. Just a few mismatched chairs in the backyard, paper plates, a Bluetooth speaker playing soft jazz. Danny came. So did Sarah from work. Even Ms. Lopez, our old neighbor who used to bring Grandma mangoes, stopped by. Everyone kept saying the same thing. This place feels like her. And I said, Because I didn't try to erase her. I just added me. But peace has its price. And sometimes, the past knocks when you least expect it. One evening, there was a knock on the front door. It was Aunt Tricia, dressed in her Sunday best, face tight with something between regret and entitlement. "Can I come in?" I didn't move. "What do you want?" She looked down, then back up. "Your father had a minor stroke. He's okay, but he's not himself. He keeps asking for you." I blinked. "Why?" She hesitated. "He said you were the only one who really knew Lorraine. That maybe you could help remind him who he used to be." That stung. Because now, they wanted me to save the same man who once tried to erase me. I told her I'd think about it. But that night, I sat on the porch alone and listened to the wind. Grandma always said, "Some people only recognize your light when theirs flickers out." I wasn't sure what I felt. Anger, pity, closure, maybe a mix. I didn't go to the hospital. Not because I hated him, but because I had nothing left to give him. He took what he wanted and I took what was already mine. No more debt between us. No more conversations owed. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing you can do. The next day, I baked a lemon tart, just like Grandma used to. I sat at the kitchen table, same chair, same chipped mug, and I said out loud, "We did it, Grandma." Because we had. Sometimes, people think justice is loud. A slamming gavel, a screaming match, a door kicked open. But for me, justice was quiet. It was the silence of a peaceful Sunday morning in the house they said I didn't deserve. It was coffee in Grandma's old mug, a breeze through the sheer curtains, birdsong, and no footsteps behind me trying to take what was already mine. They wanted the house. But I made it a home, and no court order could take that from me. I kept getting letters from extended family, some passive, some aggressive. But the worst ones, the ones that sounded polite, "We just want what's fair." Grandma would want us all to share. "Maybe you could rent out the basement. Give something back." Give something back? I gave everything. Time. Years. My youth. Late nights refilling pill bottles. Holding her hand while her lungs wheezed. Telling her jokes so she wouldn't cry after chemo. They gave opinions from afar. I gave presents. They sent fruit baskets once a year. I made soup when her teeth hurt too much to chew. They wanted to split the outcome, but none of them shared the burden. One letter was from my Uncle Roy. He wrote, "I think we all need to move on and stop living in the past." Funny, he wasn't saying that when he thought the past came with a deed. I started ignoring the mail. Danny told me, "You know they're just testing to see if you'll give in, right?" I nodded. "They want me to feel guilty. Do you?" I looked around the house, the photos on the mantel, the quilt Grandma hand-stitched, still folded over the couch. "No," I said softly. "I feel whole." That summer, I joined a local writing group. It was just 6 of us, all women, meeting every other Saturday in a coffee shop, with wobbly tables and excellent muffins. I read them a short story I'd written based on what happened. I changed the names, called it The Lemon Tree House. It was about a girl who loved her grandmother, and a family who only loved what she left behind. They cried. They clapped, and one of them, an older woman named Patricia, leaned over and whispered, "That's not fiction, is it?" I smiled. "Only the parts that needed softening." One of the women worked at a local college. She asked if I'd be willing to speak at a student event. Topic: finding your voice. At first I said no. I didn't see myself as a speaker. I was just a girl who held on when no one believed her. But then I thought about Grandma, about how many people tried to talk over her too, and how she never shouted, just insisted quietly. So I said yes. The night of the event, I wore a simple navy blouse and Grandma's gold rose brooch. I stood in front of 30 students, all eyes on me, and said, "Sometimes, the people closest to you will question your memory, your worth, and your right to be heard. But you don't need volume to prove value. You just need truth. And if you hold it tightly enough, no one can take it from you." They clapped. But more importantly, they listened. After the event, a girl came up to me. She had tears in her eyes. I'm going through something like that now. My aunt's trying to take my mom's property. I didn't know I had a right to fight. You do, I said. And even if you lose a battle, at least you'll know you stood for what was real. She hugged me. And for the first time, I realized something. What Grandma gave me wasn't just the house. It was a legacy of courage. I went home that night and sat on the porch. The violets I planted were blooming again. I could almost hear Grandma humming from the kitchen. That same old melody she'd sing while baking. You can't break a girl who knows where she stands. I stood, and I was still standing. A few days later, I got another call. Not from Dad, from his lawyer. He wanted to offer a settlement. They're willing to withdraw all future challenges if you agree to a cash payment, split between the family members named in the second will. I nearly laughed. You mean the forged will? I'm just the messenger. Well, here's my message, I said. Tell them the house isn't for sale. Not for money. Not for peace. Not for them. He sighed. They'll be disappointed. They've been disappointed since the day Grandma chose me. And I hung up. The next week, I changed the locks. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done looking over my shoulder. I even put up a little wooden sign on the porch. The house that love built. Everyone passing by would see it. And if they saw it, good. Let them know I was still here. Still standing. Still home. Some people grow up in mansions. Others in chaos. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house with peeling wallpaper, an uneven porch, and a woman who taught me that love doesn't yell to be heard. This place didn't just shelter me. It raised me. So when they said I was disrespecting the family by keeping it, by not splitting it, by not sharing, I thought about who had actually shared with me. It wasn't them. It was her. The local paper did a short piece about the writing event I spoke at. Small column. Nothing big. But it had my name and a photo of me standing at the podium. Grandma's rose brooch pinned to my blouse. A few days later, I got a letter. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Dad's again. This time, it wasn't angry. It was pathetic. You've made your point. I hope the house brings you comfort. Just know I still think what I did was right. And I'd do it again. That part made me pause. Because even after everything, after being exposed in court, after trying and failing to contest the will, after losing the battle he started, he still believed he was right. I put the letter in the same box as the others, labeled, evidence of who they really are. One night in early fall, Danny came over with a bottle of cheap wine and a big announcement. I got the internship, she said, holding up her phone. New York, 6 months. I leave in 3 weeks. I hugged her so tight we almost knocked over the wine. We sat on the back steps under the string lights, sipping and laughing and talking about everything and nothing. She was the only one who stayed neutral when things went sideways. And now, she was flying toward her own dream. Promise me something, she said. Eyes soft. Anything. Never leave this house just because they want you to. I didn't even blink. This house is me now. Let them want. I started writing more regularly. Not just essays, but a full memoir. Title, The Will. Half about Grandma, half about the fire I found inside myself. Every chapter began with one of her sayings. Things like, quiet women are loud in the long run. Some folks think inheritance means property. For us it meant pride. One afternoon, I got a call from an editor at a small publishing house. They'd read my essay, then my blog, then a few early chapters I'd posted online, and they wanted to talk. That same week, I signed a contract. A real book deal. Me, the girl they said was selfish, entitled, ungrateful, writing the story they tried to erase. Word got around, as it always does in a small town. Suddenly, people who once whispered about me in grocery aisles were sharing the news. I always knew she was smart. Lorraine would be proud. She did the right thing. I smiled, not because I needed their approval, but because I didn't anymore. Their words couldn't decorate my house. Their opinions couldn't change the title deed. They were just wind through trees. And I had deep roots now. One day I found an old recording on Grandma's phone, a voice memo I'd never noticed before. It was, "If anyone's listening, and I'm not around, just know I gave Kaylee this house because she was the only one who stayed. Not just stayed physically, stayed with me. You don't leave a home to people who treated it like a waiting room." I played that recording 5 times, then saved it to 3 different places. Because that was the truth, the loudest truth of all. I started receiving letters from readers once the book was announced. People from other states, other lives, writing to say thank you. My cousin tried to steal my dad's ranch. My uncle forged papers too. I was the only one who took care of my grandmother, and I got blamed for everything. It wasn't just my story, it was ours. It was hers. At the book launch, I stood behind a table stacked with hardcovers, each one wrapped in the same rose gold cover Grandma would have loved. People lined up, old teachers, neighbors, even strangers. Some just wanted a signature. Others wanted a moment, a hug, a truth, a shared ache. And through it all, I felt like she was there, right beside me, saying, "I told you they'd come around, but I never needed them to." As I closed up that night, one last person walked in. Dad. He looked thinner, grayer, didn't say much, just held the book in his hands, reading the title over and over. "The will." "I didn't think you'd actually tell the whole story," he said. "I told mine," I replied. "And hers." He nodded once. "It's accurate." Then he left. Didn't ask for a signature, didn't ask for forgiveness, just walked out, and that was enough, because I had already written my ending. And it didn't include him, it included her, me, and the home that held us both. There's something funny about the way silence sounds when you finally make peace with it. Not empty, not lonely, just full. Full of memory, full of truth, full of every whispered conversation, every creaky floorboard, every moment that once made up a life. The house no longer felt like something I had to defend. It felt like something I got to live in. And with every breath, every step, I carried her with me, not in grief anymore, but in gratitude. I planted a magnolia tree in the front yard, not because Grandma had one, she didn't, but because she always pointed them out when we drove past. "Magnolias know how to bloom even when the soil isn't fair," she'd say. "Kind of like you, baby." I chose a young tree, stubborn roots, petals like soft fists opening to the sun. I named it Lorraine. When the book finally released, the local paper ran a headline that said, "Local woman turns family betrayal into national bestseller." I didn't care about being famous, but I cared that her name, my Lorraine, was in people's mouths for the right reasons. Not just the house, but the woman, the one they forgot while circling her property like vultures. I made sure they remembered. The first royalty check came in the spring. It wasn't millions, but it was enough. Enough to fix the roof, to replace the old wiring, to finally get the porch swing she'd always wanted. I found a carpenter to build it custom, white wood, wide enough for 2, with iron chains that didn't creak. I placed it just outside the front window. Now every time I sit there with a book in my hand and the wind in my hair, I imagine her beside me, saying nothing, just being, like we used to. Danny visited after her internship ended. She brought wine, of course, and photos from her time in New York. "This house still smells like lemon and lavender," she said, stepping through the doorway. "Exactly how I remember it." "It's not the same," I told her. She looked around. "No, it's better." That night, we stayed up on the porch swing, wrapped in blankets, staring at the stars. "Do you think she'd be proud of you?" she asked. I didn't have to think. I know she is, because this wasn't just about a will, or a courtroom, or some dusty title deed. This was about love. And love, when it's real, doesn't die with the person who gave it. It blooms. again and again, in the people who remember. Later that summer, I was invited to speak at a national conference on estate rights and elder protection. Apparently, my story had touched more people than I realized. I stood on a stage in front of hundreds of people, lawyers, social workers, caregivers, and I told them what no one said when I was fighting alone. Sometimes the most valuable thing someone leaves behind isn't money, it's memory. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't proving what's yours, it's protecting what they left behind, from the people who once called themselves family. The room went still, then it erupted into applause. Afterward, a woman in her 60s came up to me. She was crying. "My father left me everything," she whispered, "and my siblings said I tricked him, like I was some con artist. Your book, your story, it helped me stand up in court." I hugged her, because I knew exactly how that felt. To be told that love wasn't earned, to be treated like a thief, for holding on to something that was given in trust. Back home, life settled into something steady. I hosted a reading circle in the living room once a month. College students, retirees, young moms. We sat on old couches and folded chairs, read pages aloud, shared stories about grief and survival, and drank too much tea. One night, a girl asked, "Do you ever think about selling the house now?" I smiled. "No, because it's not just mine." I pointed to the walls. "The woman who taught me everything still lives here." And they understood. One rainy afternoon, I opened Grandma's hope chest. I hadn't touched it since the trial. Inside were her favorite scarves, a church bulletin folded in half, and tucked at the bottom, a photo album I'd never seen. On the front was written, "Kaylee, for later." Each page was full of photos of me and her, cooking, gardening, dancing in the living room. Birthdays, sleepovers, even just sitting on the porch with lemonade. At the very end, one caption read, "She made my life feel worth living. Give her everything." I cried, long and quiet and holy, because there it was, the final answer. Not from a lawyer, not from a judge, but from the only voice that ever truly mattered. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote her a letter. Even though she was gone, "You didn't just give me a house. You gave me a self, a voice, a spine, a home in a world that tried to throw me out. I kept it safe. Grandma, I kept you safe. Thank you for trusting me with you." I placed the letter under the photo album. Then I stood up, looked around, and whispered, "We're good now." Sometimes when people pass by and ask if I live alone, I smile, because they don't know. They don't see her in the light fixture she chose, in the chipped counter I couldn't bring myself to replace, in the wind chimes, the porch swing, the tree blooming in the yard. They don't see that I'm never alone. I live with a legacy, one I protected, one I earned, one I honor. And when the time comes for me to pass it on, if I'm lucky enough to have a child or grandchild who loves me even half as much as I loved her, they won't have to fight like I did, because I've already written the truth down. In ink, in stories, in soul.